joining me from Chicago in a special studio is actor, voiceover artist, thespian, DJ Samuel Roukin. You remember him chiefly as John Graves Simcoe in the AMC hit Turn, Washington Spies. He was in the Oscar-nominated 2008 film Happy Go Lucky. He DJs as Roukin. He tap dances. He plays the piano. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing great, Robin. Thanks for having me. It's so nice to be here with you.
Well, I've only begged you for a decade to come on this show, but just for our listeners and our watchers on our humble YouTube channel, it's a sign of how desperate Hollywood is that you would even deign show up on my show. These are slim times.
Well, you know, I think you're lowering your caliber right now. You're a high bar to meet.
Well, you were at Fan Expo Chicago, which was all over social media where people got to meet you. I have to say, sir, you do cut a swath. I don't know if it's one of those things where you'll be like, Michael Imperioli in The Sopranos. He's always playing off Christopher. Everybody will always confront you as Simcoe because your eyes, your sociopathy, the terror and charm of that role. You can't separate it from Samuel Roukin at all of 6'3", you know?
Yeah, it's true. You know, I think that was a really kind of like a threshold for me, that show. You know, it was the first TV show I did in America. And so that was always the beginning of my journey over here. And happily, it follows me around. It gave me such pleasure doing it. And you know, seeing that it still lives is really satisfying. So that's no problem for me.
Well, I accosted you by way of background. We crossed paths in Richmond, Virginia, where you were here to shoot Turn in kind of, hallowed colonial grounds, I think near Farmville or something. I forget the area. And your base camp was Richmond, Virginia. So you were here as a young parent.
Goochland, actually.
Goochland, that's right.
Yeah.
And we had crossed paths. Will you tell us how that came about? I mean, you have a training. You've done classical training in Britain. You've been a veteran of stage. You've taken roles in film. We never imagined the extent to which the big screen and stage would morph so quickly into the world of streaming by 2025.
Yeah, it was a really perfect dovetail turn. And it was a really wild story of how it happened, actually. So they don't really happen like they did back then, but we had a thing called pilot season where around January through March, there would be all the new TV pilots would be auditioning for their shows. And then you'd see, once you'd filmed your pilot, then you would see what got picked up to go to series. And I just finished doing my first job in America, actually, which was Cyrano de Bergerac on Broadway at the American Airlines for the Roundabout. And it was my first pilot season officially having just moved to America. So we were in, I guess, 2012. And what happens is a whole pile, if you're lucky enough to have good representation, a whole pile of pilot scripts come your way. And whatever you respond to, you go on tape for, or you go in for and meet the casting director. So this was one of those scripts, and it came in and everybody wanted to do it. It was immediate. Craig Silverstein had written this incredible pilot. It was rich with character and story, and it was true. And no one had really done this story to this extent before, certainly about the Culper spy ring. So it was a very hot pilot, and it was AMC, which was still in the middle of their Mad Men final season.
Let's timestamp that for everybody. Mad Men, and to my mind, Breaking Bad, which was
Breaking
a revelation.
Bad too. That's
Those
right.
two really put AMC. I didn't remember what AMC I watched on AMC, but there was really to watch Mad Men in the early mid-aughts, and then to see
goodness, what a show.
This stuff, to then binge it. I mean, this is before Netflix was taking all of them. That was very special appointment viewing. So if you got tapped for that, it was not a second fiddle thing. You were really acting into something great. The golden age of television in the United States. You were right in the middle of it.
Yeah, so it was a super hot pilot, and I went in for it. I knew I was right for the role that I thought I was going in for, and I was wrong. They didn't think I was right for that, and so they cast me as a guest star in the pilot episode to play this British captain, John Graves Simcoe, who got killed in the pilot. So I was very excited. We just had our first baby. Then I got the offer of the job, and it was cool. So I went off to Richmond to shoot the pilot for 3 weeks, and I did. I shot the scene where I was killed. It was a super fun pilot to shoot. And I was just hoping that the show got picked up so that people would see the work, because I thought we'd done really good work. And then, like 4 months later, the show had already been picked up, by the way. About 3 months later, the show got picked up to series, which I was really happy about. And then about a month after that, I got a call from Craig Silverstein and Barry Josephson, the producers and creator of the show, saying that one of the conditions of AMC picking up the show was that they made Simcoe a series regular on the show. Like literally the phone call that changes your course of your life and career, really. So
wait, where were you when you got that call? In Manhattan?
I was in Brooklyn in our first apartment. It was in my wife and I. And I'd just come back from a run, and I came out the shower because Caitlin said, Barry's calling. And you always pick up the phone when Barry Josephson calls.
Sure.
And I was naked at the time when I took the call. And I remained naked for the whole call. But they didn't know that. I don't know if I've ever told anybody that, but I told you.
This is full disclosure.
It's full disclosure. And so was that moment. And so that was the call, and it was really exciting. And then the rest kind of is history. But it was really exciting on that show because they hadn't planned for this character to be a series regular originally, and then they began to write it as a series regular. They were building it off the performance that I'd given during what I'd come up with in the pilot. And then we kind of built it together. It was a very collaborative experience. It's very satisfying. It was good.
Samuel, when you came to the States here, were you living the kind of the bohemian ramen noodles, table bussing lifestyle when you were a Broadway actor?
So kind of. I mean, I'd had a really, fortunate experience coming up in England. I was doing some really exciting work, and I'd just been at the National Theatre in London for 6 months. I had a great part in a show called The Kitchen. And then I came over and I kind of jumped into Broadway. But whilst I was doing that, I still had a job at a running store called Jackrabbit, which I loved. I'm a big runner, and I really loved that job. And I was really trying to keep that job going during the day, not because I couldn't pay my rent, but I mean, that's why I had the job in the first place, was to keep the money coming in. But then I just really loved the job and I wanted to keep doing it. But eventually I got too busy and I had to drop it. But over the years, I've had loads of restaurant jobs and bar jobs. And in fact, one of the fun things, when I was doing Harry Potter, so I was in the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2. When I did,
by the way, things on your IMDb that I didn't.
That's right. So anyway, I loved that. Was obviously a killer job to get, and I was doing that for about a year. But when I booked that job, I was also like assistant manager at a pub in Camden Town called the Prince Albert. It's a really nice gastropub, served great food, great beers, and I would go and do a day's filming in Leavesden, which is about an hour out of London. And if it worked out, I would get dropped off in the chauffeur-driven, blacked-out Lexus and walk straight into the pub behind the bar and start pouring pints for the rest of the night. And I wouldn't tell anyone where I'd been that day. And it was
Did people not recognize you from your stage work or the bit work in Harry Potter?
No, not really. Now and again, but not really. At that time, I was just a jobbing actor doing what I did. And so I hadn't really... Yeah, some people would know me from Happy Go Lucky, maybe. But most of the time, people had, they'd have to say, "Oh, you were in that." That was kind of how that was then. But I loved that kind of double life. It was really cool. It was a fun thing I love working. I love work. I've always loved having jobs. And so I've always had jobs. And if there's spare time, I'll do something. And so but I kept that going for as long as I could as well before it became impossible to carry it on. But, that's always how I've done it.
Full disclosure, I'm Roben Farzad. My esteemed guest is award-winning actor Samuel Roukin. Most people remember him as John Graves Simcoe in the AMC hit Turn, Washington Spies. He was in Happy Go Lucky, bit parts in Harry Potter. He's been on stage. He does voiceovers for books. You might have seen him recently at Fan Expo Chicago. I have to ask you, the very inception of your creative career, did you know that you were signing up for a jobbing existence? Because let me tell you, much of this episode goes back to a conversation you and I had at Elwood Thompson's coffee shop before you left Virginia, saying you absolutely knew what you signed up for, that it was never going to be easy, that you had to calcify yourself for the inevitable lack of callbacks or getting your hopes up something, showing up for a follow-up, getting ghosted. I was impressed at kind of your age, and you're younger than I am, much taller and much better looking than I am, but being like, this is what we all signed up for, regardless of the economy, regardless of the status of Hollywood. How did you internalize that so early in life?
It's a really great question. I think it was the further I got down the road of choosing to become an actor for a living, the more I realized that, at least in my own system, it wasn't really a choice. It was something I felt I had to do. It was where my creative and physical energy needed to go. And if that becomes true to you, there's really no other option but to keep going. And certainly by the time I was in drama school at Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, which is a very classical training and very well known and well renowned, you know the raffle ticket you've bought. And it was very clear to me that there are going to be ups and downs and peaks and troughs. But also I had a quiet confidence in me that felt like I was on the right path. And I couldn't explain why, but I really felt like I was going to do it.
And the courage of your convictions enough to both move and job and gig around this, because that part was non-negotiable, that core.
Yeah, I mean, that part of it, there are people that think that, oh, actors are always out of work and why would you do something when the most of the people doing it are unemployed or whatever. I don't really look at it as in, or people talk about rejection, right? I don't really see it in those terms. Everybody has to pay their bills. Like, that's just a baseline. You got to have somewhere to sleep at night, and you've got to eat food to survive. And if you're not getting the resources from doing one thing for that, then you go find another place to get them. That's just, there's no kind of, that's not like
those are table stakes.
They're the table stakes of life. It's not a complicated thing. So you figure that out. And actors are some of the most resilient human beings I've ever met. The amount of like you mentioned earlier, like ghosting or just a plain no. If you're lucky, you get a no, actually. These things are just the way it is. And the sooner you accept that that's a possibility and you will have to pivot at some point to do something else, and the more you are able to find joy in life within that, the better chance you have of having success in the thing you set out to do in the first place. And I don't know why I knew that was true, but I did know that was true. And I think I was surrounded by, or I chose to surround myself with, other actors and artists who had a similar kind of work ethic, and also like a similar belief that they were gonna find their way to the pinnacle of the profession they were in, whether they were musicians or whether they were artists or writers or actors. The people that I was around, there was no question that we were going to all work. It was just, what were we going to be doing and where and when? And so when you're surrounded by people like that, it's infectious, and you're all helping each other as a community in that way. And it's always been like that. And I've always been seeking those people with that similar mindset of, it's going to happen, it's just when.
Samuel, as you were heating up and hotting up on Turn, and everybody was recognizing you, and people were talking about this nationally, what kind of overtures were you getting? Again, to stamp this, let's say it's the middle teens, 2016, 2017. The Turn ended in 2017, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yep. And we were still, peak HBO, peak Netflix. I mean, Netflix is still doing well. Amazon was only beginning to get its stride. I believe the first streaming commissioned series by Netflix, House of Cards, was 2014. If I remember, like a seminal event.
That's true.
I mean, Kevin Spacey and Robin Wright, and the fact that they would go out and do something like this, and to draw a line from that to then, The Irishman. I'm just dating myself. Something where they go Pacino, De Niro, throw a ton of money at it and debut. Forget about the theatrical release. I can imagine that you were the star of this show. You must have been getting solicitations and casting calls left and right, especially when the industry was flush.
You would think, but actually it wasn't quite like that. The show did really well, and was beloved by its audience, but it didn't kind of enter the zeitgeist in the same way something like Mad Men did or Breaking Bad. Like, it wasn't the water cooler conversation show, right? I think when you're on one of those kinds of shows, then things start flowing to you in a different kind of way because you are quote unquote hot at that moment. But certainly it gave me access, right? So things began to come to me at that time because streaming was really kicking off or had already kicked off in a big way. So even in between seasons, I would find myself doing shows like I did Salem. I did a season of Salem in between seasons of Turn. I did a season of I did a big episode of The Librarians,
Mm.
that was, took weeks. And so there was lots of stuff happening, and it was still kind of a newish thing, like you said, with House of Cards, that big names from the movie industry were moving into TV and taking up those opportunities as well.
Indeed, as all that sunsetted, you did move to LA. I believe was it
Right, I
2016
moved
or
to LA
2017?
immediately after Turn finished. We packed everything up and went to
Now
LA.
let's
Yeah.
stamp this, because there still was the primacy of LA from a film shooting, the ecosystem was there. Sound lots, all people on demand. I mean, that was part of the economy. And we'll get into how all of that has been so disrupted by remote, the pandemic, Atlanta, and other areas. I was imagining, and we last saw each other in Los Angeles. I think it was in 2017, and I was imagining there was nothing, nobody could see the pandemic around the corner. Nobody could see the losses from streaming. The various things, the confluence that we've described on this show, cable TV, cord cutting, the knockout punch to motion picture industry that was set by the pandemic, all these things that conspired to suddenly make this a much stingier industry, if you will. The salad days, the largesse was gone.
I think all of that is true. I moved to LA primarily to cut out as many self-tape auditions as I could.
Hmm.
I felt like I wanted to be where it was happening so that I could go in the room and audition and have that human experience. And there's something really cool about in-person auditions because the energy kind of changes and fizzes in a room when a performance is really cooking. And so it gives you an opportunity to make a difference in a way that's a little different. You can still do it on a self-tape, which is what auditions are now, but it's harder. And so my hypothesis was wrong. So when I arrived in LA, very quickly self-tapes became the commonplace beginning of every audition process, to the point where I was not only auditioning, it wasn't just that I was not cutting out self-tape auditions. In fact, I was auditioning way more on tape from my house in LA, less than a mile from the studio. I was auditioning like that more than any other way. And then, of course, when the pandemic happened, that was the beginning of the end of in-person auditions entirely. It's extremely rare that you would go in the room for an
Why is
audition
that a
now.
cost savings thing? I mean, we had something parallel in public radio and public TV. I used to go to an NPR studio to do NPR hits or to record, and that experience on a T1 connection or whatever they called it back in the day. But here we are in 2025 doing this on a riverside.
Yeah.
That a lot of these things are done over Zoom. They're done remotely. There's an app that we use for my NPR appearances and the others. It's just became the standard by the time of pandemic. I mean, these studios aren't even at full employment right now, or it's hard to staff them. People are looking for cost savings. And so you've had to adapt. You built this studio in your house.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of reasons. First of all, the technology became accessible and improved enough that people could do it in that way. First of all, it's, everybody's got an iPhone or a phone with a camera now, which means that you can audition at a good enough quality to be in the mix. So that's the first thing. Also, now casting directors are able to see more people because there used to be only so many slots that they could fit in
Now the
person in a
denominator
day.
is much fatter.
Yeah, so now, on the plus side for casting directors, they can field way more tapes. On the downside for casting directors, they now have so many tapes that they have extra work, I think, to go through all of that. And they can't possibly watch all of everybody's tapes. they've never needed to, because quite quickly they can make a decision about what they like and what they don't like. But that being said, it also means that it's less selective at the beginning, which can mean that you are in a much bigger playing field when you're auditioning too. There's lots of pluses and minuses to self-taping that I think, in the end, it's still an audition, and the cream still rises to the top. And I think you can still pop on a self-tape.
Are you competing with more people internationally now that there's no friction, there's no barrier to?
I would have no idea. One is not aware of who else is auditioning for
It's a
any
double blind.
particular job. Yeah. The audition comes from your reps, and you put yourself on tape and you send it off, and maybe you hear something and maybe you don't.
I have to ask you about your Bo Burnham moment. When we realized we were on the inside and doing things on the inside, we had to get tested. There was social distancing. This is one of those landmark events you're going to be telling your grandchildren about. You remember March of 2020. We'll be talking about it on the show ad infinitum until, it's well in the rearview mirror. But that legitimately changed everything. Paradoxically, while theme parks were shut down, while there were no live sports to subsidize ESPN and Disney and the others, there was a super resurgence in streaming investment that happened because everybody was at home. Disney, Hulu launched this kind of $6.95 teaser rate. Amazon doubles down on it. There's Apple TV, Apple TV Plus, and the others. It's a whole new set of incumbents. And even HBO, which was briefly owned by AT&T, we're talking about the era of Succession, of which I was all
Love
over
that
social
show.
media
What a
saying
show.
that how are you not hiring Samuel Roukin as a British white knight financier to come in and
It's a great idea.
to have an affair with the Australian daughter actress on the show, Sarah Snook or something like that, but shows you what I know. So meanwhile, we were binging the heck out of it. But, to get you into the business model, think of it. The business model was never as bad as it was during the pandemic. It was a last march for market share, but they were producing billions in losses every year.
Because they were burning through the library, right? They had this library and they couldn't make anything else for a minute. And so they're burning through the library, which means that come the end of the pandemic, you really need to get things going again to kind of boost your library back up.
But it was my impression that they went out signing people left and right, hoping for the end of this. Then there was the actors and writers strike, and several things happened in succession. Needless to say, in the business model stuff of it, Disney acquires what was it, Fox, and that motion picture studio. Paramount was now subsumed by Sundance. What was it called? Skydance. You have Warner Brothers Studios in somewhat of distress because of that
Disney
situation.
and Hulu. Yeah.
Hulu, which is a Disney thing. And then it's bizarre to see something like Amazon, where it will never move the needle on Amazon's financials, just like they own Whole Foods, for them to break out their outlay on motion pictures.
But they can afford to pay top talent and make
correct
beautiful
and
TV,
top talent. I mean,
beautiful
you see
movies.
The Boys.
Yeah.
You see The Boys, you see The Marvelous Mrs. Maisels. I don't remember if that's Amazon and other places. My point is you had to quickly contort and readjust in this. And after break, we're going to come back and talk about the DJing and the voiceovering and the keeping yourself, the staving off atrophy. I say that as a runner while Hollywood is figuring all this out. But give me one memory, one conversation from the onset of that pandemic or some of the worst of it that you could recall.
I was pinned for a TV show. That means you have completed the audition process and you are pre the moment where you find out if you've been offered the role or if it's not going to go your way. And pinning is where they say, please don't accept another job. Please hold this on your schedule and we'll let you know. And typically when I've been pinned, it's worked out. It means that you're very, very close to an offer, usually. And I was told that I was pinned for this show, which I won't mention what it was, at around 2 p.m. And at around 4 p.m. was the resolute desk speech from Trump saying, they're basically announcing that we're all shutting down. And the industry just went into a standstill immediately. Everyone was flown home and everything stopped. And that's the moment I'll remember because it really, it marked the end of momentum, and then everybody was in the same boat. But then I was deep in the world of audiobook recording already. and it pulled us through. It was a very fortunate thing.
Full disclosure, please stay with us. You can catch Full Disclosure on YouTube, Spotify, PR, Apple, all of the good podcatchers. I'm all over social media. You can catch me on Instagram at Roben Farzad, on LinkedIn. Heck, I bet you I still have a MySpace or Friendster account. I forgot the login, though. On socials, my DMs are always open. Our show airs on NPR member station WTTF, Radio IQ. You can catch us in Ventura, California. I want to give a shout out to KP.
I'm just asking you to take a walk.
Asheville, North Carolina. On WTVM Holler, if you would like us on your end. Coming out of break, you were listening to some of the DJ stylings of Samuel Roukin. His DJ handle is Roukin. And this will be important because we're going to talk about, keeping himself spinning and employed and warm-blooded during the worst of the pandemic. Tell us about those tracks that we just played that you gave us and how that happened.
So one of them was one of the first tracks that I released, which was called Walk With Me, which I made when I was in LA. And the second one was Game Plan, which was a track that I made with an artist from the UK called Hobbs. That was a collaboration, and it was probably the most successful of the tracks that I produced in recent times. And loads of DJs were playing it all over Ibiza and in festivals and everything that summer. It was really cool.
So are people flying you around the world for your DJ work?
Not quite, no. I mean, now and again, I would go. I went to Ibiza for a bit, and but mainly, no. I was playing in LA. I had a residency at Avalon. I was with, they produced Understated, is a record label in LA. A record label in LA that released some of my music, and I was in with that crew, and I used to play their parties, and I used to play a lot of underground, like warehouse parties around LA and that kind of thing. So, but no, I mean, mostly I was playing locally in LA whilst I was living there. And then, of course, when the pandemic happened, all of that shut down as well. So if you're talking about pivoting, that was another moment where I kind of pivoted away from music for a little bit too. I did a couple of paid remixes during that time. People were streaming from that. That was the boom of people streaming DJ sets, actually.
Yeah, I was wondering from YouTube.
That's become a whole
other thing,
avenue of the industry, and a way to extend the life of parties is to record in a really sophisticated way DJ sets in nightclubs, and then people watch them back and on YouTube and on their own channels, and does really well. And
Samuel, were you hanging a Spotify shingle? I understand it's no way to make a living on streaming music, but
I've never made any money from Spotify. No one ever did. But as a calling card, as a calling card for a DJ to be able to post that up there, DJs share. We recently had DJ Hesta Prin on the show. Cool.
And she explained how to deal with her depression during the pandemic. She just turned to DJing and streaming, and then it led to this whole other blossoming of career opportunities for her.
Yeah, for me, it was slightly different. I chose not to jump on the streaming train with DJing. It just didn't appeal to me. I've always moved, I've never been a fan of like trying to keep all the plates spinning all of the time. As an artist, I try and move where I'm drawn to, where the energy is. And when I couldn't DJ at parties anymore, and I couldn't DJ in clubs anymore, the hook of it was gone for me, because it's always been about the dance floor and about connecting people. And so I started writing more. And so during the pandemic, I was actually, I wrote a play, which is we're now finding a home for, and I wrote a couple of TV pilots, and I was working on my script writing, and also being able to pay the bills, because I was doing voiceover work, and I was lucky enough that I built up that part of my work in during normal times.
But it's interesting you say you don't have every plate spinning, but from all outward appearances, you have your many burners on the oven, if you will.
That is true. But what happens in my world privately is that when I'm creating something, when I'm creating a play or a TV pilot or something like that I'm writing, all my spare time and energy goes into that until it's done. And I will, of course, do other things around it, but creatively, I'm kind of drawn in one direction until I'm not, and then it's done, and then I can move into something else. So at that time, that's where I was putting my energy, and then we moved house during that time as well. So it was like it was a busy time in that respect. But then, as luck would have it, there were a couple of projects that started to figure out how to make their show. So I, during the pandemic, got offered a movie that I was able to come to LA and pass all the protocols and all of that kind of stuff. And I did All Souls with starring opposite Mikey Madison, who we all know now. That was the movie that came out before the Oscar-winning movie. So it was Honora. I had a name freeze then. So that was one of the movies I shot during the pandemic. And so work started to trickle in, and then Call of Duty happened, and that kind of changed everything.
Call of Duty as a voiceover artist?
Well, no, full performance. So the games like Call of Duty, which have a big campaign and cut scenes, most of it is done on the stage as full performance capture. So the head
they
cam,
set you up with all
the
of
body,
the nodes
all the
across
dots,
everything?
all of that stuff, and only the add-ons are done in the booth, but most of it is done live, and it's your full body and it's your full voice. It's like doing a movie, but it's for a video game world.
And a big green screen behind it with all the nodes.
No green
on your
screen.
Body,
it's in a thing called the Volume, basically, which is a big studio, and there are about 200 cameras that are collecting the data off every move you make, and the camera is on your face, and there's lights on it, and it's called an HMC, a head mounted camera, and it's collecting all of that facial information too, so that when it goes into the engine of the game, it's really you.
Did it freak out your boys when they first saw that?
Yeah, it's a good flex for them. They love that. They love Call of Duty, yeah.
CGI
but Call of Duty was really that was the first big job out of the pandemic. It began during the pandemic. We were getting every time you went in, you got tested, and you had to clear all the protocols every single day, and it was a pain, but everybody got through it and everybody was doing it. But it was that Call of Duty is just this huge juggernaut, and has this massive fan base, and that was a really fun new direction for my work. I'd never done a video game before, and now it's
I trolled you about this beforehand. You go by DJ, you're just known as Roukin. Why not the Rook is on fire? The Rook is on fire. For years I've been pleading with you.
Well, when you're in the crowd, you can yell the Rook is on fire. No one's going to object to that.
It could have been the name of
your CD. It's a bit long, isn't it? It's a bit long. It's a bit long as a name.
CD is a compact disc. It was something that we very fleetingly, we had MP3s and other things. But talk to me about voiceover, because this is something that I was fascinated by. You talked about, Audible, the world of ebooks, the world of narration. When you mentioned the iPhone's primacy and being able to film yourself with a very powerful, if not quite 4K, then maybe 1080 camcorder that all these people have, like talk about table stakes. The recording element of this, the demand for people. I know NPR people who are brought in to ebooks. I know, having been an author, trying to get a prime voice for my History of Cocaine Miami that they didn't want to pay for. You are suddenly, how did you hang a shingle as a premier voiceover talent? And of course, what you see right now, everybody, in the video, is that probably great mic that you have. Looks like a Neumann mic or something, the sound diffusion in the studio. I imagine you could do this in between acting gigs or when the family is asleep. Tell me about that.
So the setup I have now is a kind of a late development, because now in the voiceover world, when you're auditioning for stuff, they need to know whether you have the ability to create broadcast quality audio from your own home. And sometimes, if you're not located exactly where their studio is, if you can't provide that, then you're out of the running. So again, like, the table stakes have gone up. That's a separate conversation about what's demanded of actors now in terms of equipment and ability to certainly in the voiceover world, if you want to have like a buoyant career doing it, you really have to have the ability to record yourself somehow. Maybe you're going into somebody else's house, or you're going into somebody else's studio, but you need a way to do it remotely so that you can be at the table. That being said, the audiobook strand of my career really happened very organically. I was doing a play on Broadway, like I mentioned, and one of my castmates, an American actor, was going off during the day doing all these audiobooks, which I've always wanted to do. I thought it was really a cool way for actors to work during the day when they're doing a play at night, or just in general. So he told me that he was doing this, and I thought that was really great. And I said, oh God, I'd love to do that. And then the casting director came to see him in the play. And the next day I got a call saying, would you come in and audition for this, or do a sample for us? We're looking to collect more English voices. And it was Recorded Books, which is one of the premier audiobook producers in the world. And in fact, their studio, I actually don't know if it is still there. They may have moved, but their studio was above the Strand Bookshop in Manhattan.
In Union Square?
That's right. And they had, their office was like 4 floors up. And they had the whole floor. And they had about 4 different booths in there with, an engineer's desk on the other side. And then they had their offices, and it was all done from there. And so there I went and did put down my sample. Little did I know that I was actually auditioning for the book I was reading a sample for, and I was offered it. So then I did my first audiobook. That was it. That's how it happened.
What was that first audiobook?
The first audiobook, you've got me.
We can excerpt it here, or I can go back.
You can go back in time and look at it. I've done over 100 of them now.
Really?
So, yeah. So, and then what happened was, it was a really beautiful world to get into, because it's just one of those things that when you're in the club and a producer, you become somebody that they turn to when they need a certain voice for a certain thing. And so then I just started getting offered audiobooks on a fairly regular basis, and I would go in and do them, and it was great. And I loved reading all of the books, and some of them are better than others, but as a way to keep the lights on as an actor.
Well, give us one name to excerpt here to pod so that our listeners can hear it.
So eventually I started doing a lot, and I would have some series that I would do. So I've done many Anne Perry books. I've done several Danielle Steele books. I've done
Danielle Steele.
Yeah, I know. Christopher Rucchio, who has this huge Sun Eater series. I did Elric of Melniboné, a very famous series of books, and I've just completed yesterday a fairly well-known book called The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, wow.
So that's coming out very, very soon. I was amazed and delighted that I was asked to be the next narrator for those incredible stories, but I was, and that's been really fun. So over the years, I've done lots and lots of them. And during the pandemic, of course, I know you're about to do that. During the pandemic, every actor wanted to get into the audiobook world, because it was the only way. Voiceover was really the only permitted way to be working as an actor during the pandemic. But from what I could tell, the audiobook producers were really looking after the people that were already doing it. And it became a difficult thing to get into, but a really fantastic thing to be doing.
What good fortune from your stage experience and the casting director coming in. Full disclosure, stay with us.
A true fourth carrier, CV5, USS Yorktown, glided through the Panama Canal over Christmas. She missed Nimitz in San Diego by a week. Her theater of operations has permanently changed from Atlantic to Pacific, where she will serve the rest of her days. Whether it can be argued the United States has 3 carriers in the Pacific, or 4, or even 5, the sobering truth is that Japan has 11, an almost 4-to-1 ratio, or at the very least, more than 2-to-1.
If you're just joining us, my guest is Samuel Roukin, actor, voiceover guy, Broadway, off-Broadway, across the pond, here in the pond, video games, DJ, known as Roukin. You were listening to some of his audiobook work. I definitely wanted to excerpt that, and we'll have more of his DJ work to close the show. But I got to ask you, what does it take typically? I mean, if the median book is this many hours to listen to, how many hours? We once had a conversation about this. How long do you typically have to sit in and bill to do a book? I mean, it's War and Peace, and there's Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. I understand that.
Yes. So the average novel usually is around 300 and change pages. right? So that ends up being something like 9 to 10 hours of output, of finished audio. And a good ratio is kind of like 2 to 1. So for every minute, it takes you 2 minutes because you're going and then you're stopping and you make a mistake and then you go back and then you.
So is there someone in the booth saying, can you do that again, take that again?
Yeah, they'll catch you on. So typically you have an engineer / director, and sometimes you have an engineer and a director, depending on the producer, what they like to have. And so they'll catch you on pronunciation. They'll catch you on missed words. They'll catch you on abridged words. If you turn a they are into a there and the producer doesn't want that, sometimes they request that, but they'll catch you on all sorts of different things. And sometimes you'll catch.
It sounds like
often I
a
catch myself.
Stanley Kubrick experience with takes, retakes.
Yeah.
And how do you preserve your voice, or what do you do mornings of, evenings before? Do you
Um,
ensure your
lots of tea.
you don't ensure your larynx with Lloyd's of London?
No. I mean, I always have my Yorkshire Gold with me because I'm a gentleman. But I typically just make sure I'm really hydrated and lots of tea and lots of water and enough caffeine to keep you awake. And yeah, it's I mean, if it's what you do for a living, I mean, I don't really have to think too hard about looking after my voice at this point. It's the instrument is constantly, oiled and ready to go, as it were.
Hasn't J-Lo insured her hindquarters or legs, or is that apocryphal?
I wouldn't know.
I think you should know as an actor, right? You should know all of the things, the actuarial things, but I digress as I normally do. In the 10 minutes or so we have left, Samuel, I have to ask you where this is headed in terms of artificial intelligence. This was a big bargaining impasse during the actors and writers strike. The fact that your likeness can be taken, you talk about feeding all this stuff for a video game, but now anybody can go in and tap into your thousands and thousands of man hours of TV, film, stage, audiobook work and give us a kind of a Rukicon 5000 version of you. You should have dibs on that in perpetuity. Your grandkids should get royalties. There are ways of bringing back venerable actor names that I'm actually terrified myself. I could have a really lame phone conversation with you right now, and the AI technology is there in mid 2025 for us to upscale it from machine learning of thousands of hours of our high quality conversations. Where are you in that conversation? To what extent does it keep you up at night? Is it peril? Is it opportunity? Is it both?
There's a couple of angles that I think about this on. The first is it's already here and it's already being used extensively in every project that we work on, except theatre, because that's in person and live. But as it relates to every other kind of work that we do, it's involved. It's involved in audiobooks, not in the piece that I deliver, but in the editing of the book afterwards and in the catching of mistakes and all of that stuff.
Sure.
A lot AI is being used in that. AI is being used in the engineering. In video games, we could not make video games
Without AI.
without certain elements of AI. The sticking points have been, is there a way to make a digital replica of an actor without their consent? And the union has stepped up and said, that's where we are drawing our line in the sand and making sure that our members are protected. Is if you are creating a digital replica in any shape or form, it has to be transparently done and the actor has to consent to it and they have to be remunerated as if they were doing the job. So it might make your life easier if you think that's true by not having to bring actors in and all the rest of it, and that's fine. But then you have to pay the actor that you are replicating as if they were there. So that's I mean, there's a lot of minutiae within that world, but that's the headlines of it basically. And it's the same in the TV and film world too. That's kind of the gist of it. Is you can't do it without an actor's consent. it can't be secret. It has to be transparent, and you have to pay them, the actor, as if you use them, even if you didn't.
But here's the thing, who has to abide by that? The major studios here in the United States who believe in rule of law? Like, what's to stop the Chinese or the Russians or the North Koreans? We've seen, I don't mean to sound like Andy Rooney on 60 Minutes. This is before your time to like, I don't know about this AI stuff. But you're seeing this stuff on Insta and TikTok. It's pretty mind-blowing, and we're still in the first few innings of where this machine generated stuff is headed.
Sure, I can't speak to how policeable it is, right? Because if anybody was to try and replicate something and they convince somebody, then they did it, and that's the end of it. And most of that kind of thing will not be caught by anybody. But the point, that's the point of a contract. That's the point of a contract between a union and an employer, is that it's an agreement, and the agreement is that you do it in the way that it was agreed to. Now, the bigger question is, which goes back to your original question of, how are you looking at it? This is how I view the AI and art in general. Is really the question is, what does the audience want? Human being audience members, our community, our society, essentially and ultimately will choose whether we want are human stories told by human beings who go around feeling and experiencing the same things that you do, or whether we want a synthesized version of that by an artificial intelligence. And just because something's possible doesn't mean that's where it will end up. And whilst it's possible, maybe, I'm not sure that the technology is actually there yet for you to completely create a movie or a TV show with what seem like actors, but actually they're not, and it be compelling, and it be believable, and feel authentic. That may be possible, but time will tell whether that's something that an audience actually wants to tolerate. And in my experience, when you take human beings out of the human experience suffers as a result. So I would bet on human beings to still want their stories to be told to them by other human beings.
So this human being here, at least from my cheap seats, some of the narration, if you go to the Wall Street Journal's app, it's just really bad. It's
tell.
beyond,
Yeah, you can tell.
it's so uncanny valley that they gave it to AI. There should be, and I believe there will be, a route, and somebody is seeding it already, where you can go and with your consent and your licensing agreement, get the Roukin flavor. And actually people can go out and opt into the Roukin voice to read their FT, to read their Wall Street Journal, and not bombard you, not inundate you with all this demand for your actual, 18 hours of per book voiceover work. That's the exciting thing. And in perpetuity, we could have, Roukin in perpetuity. In perpetuity, we could apply it to, I don't know, a car commercial ad. And that would be a better use of your time, a kind of a mass produce. Maybe it's taking the humanity out of it. In the humanity, like the apotheosis of the humanities, when you're doing stage work, of course, which probably is not the most financially compensating, but it might be the best for your soul. But all this other stuff, use your illusion, look into this crystal ball. It could be very different 10 years hence in terms of your portfolio of work and income.
Definitely will be. I mean, that's if the last 5 years have shown us anything, the one thing we can guarantee that is that in 10 years' time, it will look entirely different yet again.
Samuel, in closing, tell us, are you agnostic if the next big gig, I mean, it sounds like you could be a showrunner. If you've been writing and you've been, doing this stuff, you've acted, you've produced. I think of someone like Jason Bateman, who was a child star. He's part-time podcaster. He's a showrunner. He's an actor. If in a pinch, could somebody ever tap you to showrun? Like, in my ill-starred relationship with my book getting optioned, and during the pandemic, there was force majeure, and ultimately the options fell apart. My impression was that there are certain golden children in Hollywood that get stuff done, regardless of environment, regardless of the studio's health. People want relationships with makers, right? Can you explain that as a kind of a possibility for your work? Because I want to impress upon people how diligent you've been as a, out there gigging, finding soulful work as a DJ, as a voiceover artist, finding stage work. We haven't even discussed commercial work or commercial opportunities coming in. But suppose you get that knock and you come out of the shower. I don't know if you're undressed or dressed or in a bathrobe, and someone is looking for a showrunner. Is that something you'd want to do? Get behind the camera?
Yeah, and I've already been behind the camera. I wrote and produced my own short films. I've directed music videos, and I've shadowed a couple of times on TV shows with the intent of directing at some point, and it's hugely satisfying in its own way to me. I love being behind the camera. It's a different way of creating, and it's a different set of skills entirely. And TV directing is requires different skills than directing a movie, than directing a play. They're all in the same world, but they all require very different things. And show running is as well an extremely layered and difficult job that I mean, typically I think, show running comes to writers, further down the road in their career once they've been around it a lot and that kind of thing. So show running feels like a very, again, like another set of skills that I don't know that I've learned yet. But certainly with writing, you're entering that world, and with the intent to produce that work and be the driving force behind it happening. And that's really exciting. It's the same reason, I wrote a play is because I felt like I had a story to tell, but also because I want that story to be told in that way, in that environment. And then you surround yourself with the people that can make that a thing. And I think that's the same way with everything I do, is that, I go in the direction that I want to work in, and then hopefully you surround yourself with the people that can help you do that. I'd never directed anything behind the camera before I wrote and produced my own films, but you surround yourself with the people that can prop you up and catch you when you're falling and guide you in that direction. And the next time you do it, you fall less. And so that's really how I look at it. Everything's learnable. And I think if you're a creative, if you're an artist, you will find a way.
Close us out, Samuel, with some sage wisdom, words of advice. I mean, it's not that it's one size fits all, but if somebody accosts you and they pull you aside and they manage to get 20 minutes on Zoom with you, what are you able to advise in this murky kind of fear and loathing period for Hollywood?
As what, an actor to an actor?
Actor to an actor, an actor to an extra, an actor to a film student, a creative, a Broadway person, somebody who's taken a gap year.
I think you go where the yes is. That's been the singular reason that personally I have kept busy all the time, is that when something comes your way, look for the reasons to say yes more than you look for the reasons to say no. If someone comes to you and says, hey, do you want to come and do this thing, this creative project, and even if and you're just starting out and you're finding your feet as an artist, look for the reasons to say yes before you say, well, I can't afford to do that, or that's not going to pay my bills this month. Probably not. But is there some value in it? And when you start to build those creative projects that you were involved in, even though those in and of themselves didn't sustain you, suddenly you have a body of work to hang your hat on that can bring you to the next thing that will sustain you. If I had said, I don't think I want to do that, and said no to all of the things that I had a question about, then I wouldn't be able to do all of the amazing different kinds of work that I've been lucky enough to do. And self-belief is the number one ingredient to being resilient. Believing that what you're passionate about is something that's important and worth putting your energy into, that's the thing that will get you through. And when the rejections come, know that they are nothing to do with you.
Samuel Roukin, voiceover star, behind the pen, behind the camera, in front of the camera, on stage. with video games CGI, sir. I don't know, what do we call you, like the Swiss Army knife of creatives,
I'll
or are you
take
an
it.
Inspector Gadget? Maybe you can play Inspector Gadget in the live action
Swiss Army knife is fine with me. A
Swiss
leather
Army
man.
knife. Sir, it is a joy. It is an absolute joy to have you on. I've only been chasing you now for 8 years. Where can we find you on the socials?
You can find me at Roukin Official on Instagram and on X mainly. That's where I hang. That's where I hang on the social media, usually on Instagram.
It's wonderful to see. I hope you come back to Virginia sometime.
Thanks for having me, Robin. It's my absolute pleasure.